Okay, so we just went over some of the basic anatomy of the kidneys. Now I want to go over the basic processes that occur in the nephron. We have four main processes that occur in the nephron slash kidney. They are the following. One, filtration. So filtration is movement of fluid and solutes from the blood to the lumen. And I want to point out that this is kind of like a mass movement that is non-selective, okay? Reabsorption is movement of fluid and solutes from the lumen, sorry, lumen means the inside of the tubule, okay, from the lumen of the tubule back into the bloodstream, okay? Secretion is movement of materials from the blood to the lumen, okay? So you can see that it's similar to filtration, but the difference between secretion and filtration is that secretion is a selective movement. So we pick particular molecules to move from the blood into the lumen of the tubule, um, rather than having this kind of like mass non-selective movement, okay? And then finally, we have the process of excretion, where we move materials from the lumen of the tubule to the outside of the body. All right, so let's take a look at this next slide, which diagrams these basic processes and where they occur within the nephron. Okay, so starting over here at Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule is the site of filtration. This is the only place where we're going to see filtration in the nephron. As you can see, we filter a lot of fluid from the glomerulus into Bowman's capsule, 180 liters per day, okay? The filtrate is basically very similar to the composition of blood plasma. So it's basically kind of the same, except for there's less proteins. There's basically not proteins in the filtrate. Okay, moving on, the proximal tubule is going to be our main site of reabsorption. So most of the fluid that gets reabsorbed in the nephron gets reabsorbed in the proximal tubule. And I want to point out, if you look at this figure here, okay, the start of the loop of Henle, what we see happening here is this is the volume of fluid that is entering the loop of Henle, 54 liters per day. If you compare that to how much fluid is filtering into the proximal tubule, 180 liters per day, you can see that a lot of that, right? So the difference between those numbers is going to be the amount that's being reabsorbed back as it moves through the proximal tubule. So that is a lot of reabsorption, okay? We also have some secretion happening in the proximal tubule. All right, moving on to the loop of Henle, we have selective reabsorption of ions and water. We will go over the details of that later, okay? Right, so we have even less fluid moving through by the time we get to the end of the loop of Henle. And then finally, in the distal tubule and the collecting duct, what we have happening is like a selective reabsorption and secretion. And what we're doing is that is done to fine tune our salt and water balance, right? So like if we have too much sodium in our bodies, sodium will be secreted into the collecting duct so that it can be excreted from the body. Or if we need to change our pH, we're going to do that by secreting or absorbing materials like hydrogen ion or bicarbonate ion in this portion of the nephron, okay? Finally, the fluid that leaves the collecting duct is going to get excreted from the body. Remember, excretion is the fluid leaving the body, okay? Looking at these other processes here, how could you express this volume, the volume being excreted, mathematically? So think about that for a moment. How would you express that? Hit pause if you need to. Okay, so the amount that we end up excreting is going to be the amount that we filter, right? So the amount that's entering the tubule to begin with, minus the amount that gets reabsorbed into the body, plus the amount that we are secreting into the tubule. Okay, so that's going to be the amount that we excrete. Okay, so those are our basic processes in the nephron. I'm just going to close by showing you this table from your book that describes the processes, what happens with those processes in the different segments of the nephron, and then some details about those processes, which we haven't really covered yet, but we will be going over in the next few lectures.